Nietzsche was right. This world is a mess. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why everything feels so chaotic? Not just in your personal life, but in the world at large, why it seems like society is always on the brink of collapse, why happiness feels fleeting, why meaning is so hard to grasp, and why, despite all our technological advancements, we are still plagued by the same existential dread that tormented humans thousands of years ago. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most controversial and misunderstood philosophers of all time, had an answer. The world is a mess because the structures we once relied on, religion, morality, tradition, have crumbled, leaving us lost in a sea of uncertainty. But here's the thing, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe, just maybe, the fact that everything is falling apart is exactly what we need to finally take control of our own lives. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you believed in, everything you were taught to trust, was nothing more than a comforting lie. That's essentially what Nietzsche argued when he declared that God is dead. He didn't mean it in a literal sense, but rather as a statement about the decline of absolute moral and religious authority. For centuries, people found meaning in life through religion, through the belief in a higher purpose, a divine order structuring the universe. But as science, reason, and modernity advanced, these old beliefs began to erode. The problem? Nothing replaced them. We were left in an abyss, where the old values no longer held power, but no new values had yet taken their place. And this is where the chaos begins.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Look around. We live in an era of unprecedented access to information, yet we are more confused than ever. We have endless choices, yet we are paralyzed by indecision. We are told we can be anything, yet most of us feel like we are nothing. This is the crisis of meaning that Nietzsche predicted. When the structures that gave life coherence dissolve, we are left to face the terrifying reality that meaning is not something given to us, it is something we must create for ourselves. And this is where most people stumble. It's easier to cling to comforting illusions than to forge our own path. It's easier to follow the crowd than to carve out our own destiny. But Nietzsche warns us, if we do not take responsibility for our own lives, we will inevitably fall into nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless, that nothing matters, that there is no point in striving for anything. And once you fall into nihilism, it is almost impossible to get out. Think about it. How many people do you know who are just drifting through life, numbing themselves with distractions, avoiding the hard questions, refusing to confront the reality of their situation? Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you felt that creeping sense of emptiness, that quiet voice in the back of your mind whispering that something is missing, that there has to be more to life than this. And you're right, there is more. But no one is going to hand it to you. No one is going to tell you what your purpose is, what your values should be, what your life should mean. That is your burden and your opportunity. But let's be honest, this is terrifying. We crave certainty, structure, something solid to hold on to. And yet, Nietzsche tells us that we must embrace the chaos. We must become what he called the Übermensch, the overman, or superhuman. This is not some kind of comic book superhero, but rather a person who has transcended the limitations of conventional morality, but who has rejected the old values and created their own. The Übermensch does not seek validation from society. The Übermensch does not follow the herd. The Übermensch does not drown in nihilism, but forges new meaning through sheer will. But how do we do this? How do we become the Übermensch in a world that constantly tries to break us down? Nietzsche gives us a clue: amor fati, the love of fate. This means embracing everything that happens to you, good or bad, as necessary. It means not wishing things were different, but instead seeing every challenge, every hardship, every failure as fuel for your growth. Because here's the truth: the world will never be fair. Life will never be easy. A chaos will always exist. But you have a choice. You can either be crushed by it, or you can rise above it. So, I ask you, what are you afraid of? What illusions are you still clinging to? What would happen if you let go of everything you were taught to believe and started building your own path? The burden of freedom and the terror of responsibility, if everything you once believed in was stripped away, if all the rules, expectations, and comforting illusions vanished overnight, what would you do? Would you feel liberated, or would you feel paralyzed? This is the real weight of Nietzsche's philosophy, the recognition that when the old gods die, when the structures of meaning collapse, we are not given freedom as a gift, but as a burden. Because to be truly free means to take full responsibility for your own existence, and that is a terrifying prospect. Most people do not want freedom, they want security. They want someone to tell them what to do, what to value, what to believe, because making those decisions for oneself is exhausting, overwhelming, even unbearable. This is why so many people, even in the modern world, seek out new forms of servitude. They may no longer believe in divine commandments, but they will submit to ideologies, to social expectations, to the opinions of the masses. They will trade their autonomy for the comfort of belonging, for the illusion of certainty. They will follow trends, adopt the beliefs of their peers, mold themselves into whatever shape society demands, all because they are terrified of standing alone. But Nietzsche warns us, this is a form of spiritual death. To live according to the values of others, to let the world dictate your purpose, is to become nothing more than a shadow, a hollow reflection of external forces. And if you live this way long enough, one day you will wake up and realize that you never truly lived at all. But here's the paradox: even though people fear the weight of freedom, they also crave it. There is a voice inside every human being that longs to break free, to create, to express its will without restraint. This is the conflict that defines so many lives, the war between the desire for independence and the fear of what independence truly requires. Because to be free does not mean simply doing whatever you want. It means taking full ownership of your existence, of your successes and your failures, of your joys and your suffering. It means no longer blaming society, no longer looking for external saviors, no longer waiting for someone else to tell you what your life should mean. It means standing in the abyss and declaring, I will decide. I will create my own values. I will forge my own path. But let's be honest, this is easier said than done. How does one even begin to take control of their own life in a world that constantly tries to shape them into something else? How does one resist the pull of conformity, the temptation of complacency? Nietzsche gives us a clue with his concept of eternal recurrence, the idea that you should live each moment as if you would have to relive it, over and over, for eternity. Imagine that every decision you make, every action you take, every word you speak, will be repeated infinitely. Would you still make the same choices? Would you still waste your time on meaningless distractions? Would you still allow fear to dictate your life? This thought experiment forces us to confront a brutal truth. most of us are not living as if our lives truly matter. We procrastinate, we settle, we avoid risk, we drown ourselves in triviality, all because we assume we have time. But what if you didn't? What if every wasted moment, every cowardly decision, every act of self-betrayal had to be repeated forever? Would you not demand more from yourself? Would you not strive to become someone worthy of eternity? The reality is, you do not have infinite time. Your days are slipping away, one by one, and with each passing moment, you are either moving toward the person you were meant to become, or you are drifting further away. And at the end of it all, when you look back on your life, will you be proud of what you see? Will you be able to say that you truly lived, that you took risks, that you created meaning instead of waiting for it to be handed to you? Or will you realize, too late, that you spent your life in chains of your own making? So I ask you, if you had to live this life over and over again, exactly as it is, would you be satisfied? If not, why aren't you changing it? What is stopping you from becoming the person you were meant to be? The war within, overcoming the weakness that holds you back. If you are honest with yourself, you will admit that there is a part of you holding you back, or a voice in your head that whispers doubts, that tells you to stay where you are, to not push too hard, to not reach too far. This is the voice of weakness, of fear, of everything in you that resists growth. And it is your greatest enemy. Nietzsche understood that the struggle of life is not merely against external forces, but against the internal forces that keep us small. The world is a mess, yes, but what about the battlefield inside your own mind? How much of your suffering is truly caused by the outside world, and how much is self-inflicted? How often do you sabotage yourself, shrink from challenges, cling to comfort, even when you know it is killing you? The problem is that most people do not want to face this truth. It is easier to blame others, to blame society, to blame circumstances. But the harsh reality is that no external force is more powerful than the chains you place on yourself. The way you think, the way you react, the way you shrink away from your own potential, these are the barriers that keep you from becoming more. Nietzsche's idea of the will to power is not just about dominating others, it is about conquering yourself, overcoming the limitations that keep you weak. And this is where most people fail, because true self-overcoming is painful. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, you reinforce weakness. Every time you avoid difficulty, you train yourself to be fragile. And the worst part, you don't even realize it's happening. You convince yourself that you are simply tired, that you deserve rest, that you will change later. But later never comes. The more you delay, the harder it becomes. And one day you wake up and realize that years have passed and you are still the same. The same fears, the same excuses, the same unfulfilled potential. And that realization that you have wasted time, that you have betrayed yourself, is one of the most suffocating feelings a person can experience. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not just an abstract idea, it is a call to action. It is a demand that you rise above the version of yourself that is weak, passive, and afraid. But do not mistake this for mere motivation. It is not about feeling inspired for a moment and then falling back into your old patterns. It is about war. A war against the part of you that wants to stay asleep. A war against the habits that keep you stagnant. A war against the mindset that makes you believe you are powerless. The truth is, you are not powerless. You have the capacity for immense strength, for incredible creation, for radical transformation. But that potential means nothing if you do not act on it. Action is the great separator between those who rise and those who decay. You can think, you can plan, you can dream, but if you do not act, you are nothing. Nietzsche despised those who lived in theory but never in practice. He saw them as the last men, weak, complacent, satisfied with mediocrity. And the world is full of last men, people who have given up on greatness in exchange for comfort and distraction. Look around. How many people do you see truly striving for something greater? How many are pushing beyond their limits, refusing to settle, demanding more from themselves every day? The answer is very few. Most people are sleepwalking through life, numbing themselves with entertainment, avoiding discomfort at all costs, waiting for something, anything to give them meaning. But waiting is a slow death. Meaning is not given, it is forged. Strength is not innate, it is built. Power is not granted, it is seized. And every day you have a choice: remain as you are, or take the first step toward something greater. But most will not take that step. Most will hesitate, rationalize, delay. And that hesitation is what separates the few who rise from the many who remain trapped. So, I ask you, what are you still waiting for? What excuse is keeping you from action? What would happen if, for once, you stopped hesitating and started moving? The fire within, reclaiming your power in a world that wants you weak. At some point, you must decide what kind of life you are going to live. Will you continue drifting, allowing the tides of society, fear, and self-doubt to dictate your fate? Or will you seize control, embrace the struggle, and carve out a destiny that is truly your own? The world is a mess, yes, but that does not mean you have to be. In fact, the more chaotic the world becomes, the more vital it is that you find your own inner order, that you build something unshakable within yourself. Because if you do not, you will be consumed by forces greater than you. And there is no mercy for those who refuse to fight for their own existence. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He saw that most people would rather be controlled than take responsibility for their own freedom. They would rather be told what to do, what to believe, what to value, because making those choices for themselves is terrifying. But the price of that passivity is enslavement. The moment you allow others to define your purpose, you have already lost. You become just another cog in the machine, another faceless member of the herd, another soul extinguished before it ever had the chance to burn. But you are not here to be a cog. You are not here to fade into obscurity, to live a life dictated by fear and conformity. You are here to create, to struggle, to overcome, to become. And that process will not be easy. It will demand everything from you. It will require you to face your deepest fears, to destroy the parts of yourself that are weak, to endure suffering without breaking. But what is the alternative? To live a life of quiet desperation, to look back years from now and realize that you never truly lived. That is the fate of those who refuse to fight. The will to power is not about controlling others, it is about mastering yourself. It is about developing the strength to stand alone, to think for yourself, to act in accordance with your highest vision. It is about becoming the kind of person who does not need validation, who does not crumble under pressure, who does not waste time waiting for permission to live. And the irony is, the moment you embody this power, the world begins to change around you. People who once ignored you start paying attention. Opportunities that once seemed impossible begin to appear. Life bends to the will of those who refuse to be passive. But it all starts with a single decision to act, to stop hesitating, to stop making excuses, to stop postponing your own greatness. You do not need more time. You do not need more motivation. You do not need permission from anyone. You need only to decide that enough is enough, that you will no longer be a spectator in your own life. And once you make that decision, truly make it, everything changes. So, I leave you with one final question. If not now, then when? If not you, then who? The world will not wait for you. Your time is slipping away. The question is, will you rise before it is too late?